Southern California Edison and state policymakers are taking action to mitigate the threat of wildfires facing the state in 2021. As drought conditions worsen, utility experts detail SCE's wildfire mitigation efforts to address that risk. Over the last several years and in 2021, SCE mitigation efforts include the use of advanced technologies to improve situational awareness, an extensive vegetation management program, grid hardening in high fire risk areas, and support for local firefighting efforts. The experts also discussed the state's actions in wildfire mitigation and prevention, and the outlook for the wildfire season.
The safety of our communities and wildfire mitigation are a top priority for SCE as we strengthen our programs and our operations to reduce the risks that we face. Now, the effects of climate change only intensifies this risk. So we have stepped up our comprehensive mitigation efforts, which is reflected in the substantial progress of our wildfire mitigation plan. This includes hardening the grid, bolstering our situational awareness, and improving our operational practices. We also continue to invest in new technologies to mitigate the possible risk of fires from electric infrastructure, which accounts for about 10% of the wildfires in the state each year. The leading cause of ignitions from electric utility systems are from contact with foreign objects with our overhead conductors. So the things that we're concerned about are debris blowing into our lines, things like balloons, animals, vehicle incidences, and all of these account for about 70% of all the total relevant ignitions that we see in our system every year. Now, a significant way to reduce these risks is replacing our bare wires that are on our existing poles with covered insulated conductor. Now, this improves the resilience of our utility systems against contact with foreign objects that can create a spark. Now, we know this because patrols that have been conducted after windy events have found examples of foreign objects in our lines. Now, once installed, covered conductor allows us to reduce the need for public safety power shutoff events and to safely keep the power on, except under the strongest and windiest conditions. Now, patrols in the field have found examples of vegetation and lines that have been de-energized, avoiding potential ignitions, which is demonstrating the need for covered conductor. So we are accelerating the pace of covered conductor installation and expect to install about 1,000 circuit miles in 2021. Now, at this pace, we would have installed about 2,500 circuit miles total, substantially reducing the risk of wildfires that is associated with utility equipment. So in addition to hardening the grid, we have also accelerated inspections of our infrastructure and continue to invest in effective maintenance and vegetation management. Now, from December 2018 through 2019, we have completed inspections on all overhead transmission, distribution, and generation equipment located in high fire risk areas. We use both traditional ground, helicopter, and drone inspections to get a full 360-degree view of our infrastructure and our equipment. Now, in 2021, nearly 60% of distribution assets and approximately 50% of transmission assets in high fire risk areas will be inspected. This accounts for 99% of wildfire risks in our high fire risk areas. So that's nearly 200,000 distribution and 23,000 transmission assets that are located in our fire risk areas. So our vegetation management program inspects roughly 1.4 million trees in our rights-of-way, which includes 740,000 trees in high fire risk areas each year, pruning roughly about 70% of them. Now, we also inspect what's called hazard trees that are outside our rights-of-way. These are trees that could fall or blow into our equipment. Now, since 2018, our certified arborists have assessed over 240,000 of these hazard trees, typically removing about 10% of them. Now, and in 2021, we plan to inspect about 125,000 potential hazard trees and mitigating about 20,000. There's a lot of work that our crews are doing to protect against wildfires in our high fire risk areas. So we're focused on safety efforts to ensure that our maintenance work can also be conducted safely. So when elevated fire weather threat conditions exist, we postpone non-emergency work on our energized lines. We also clear work areas or continually wet down vegetation to prevent potential ignitions, with our crews that are equipped with sufficient water, extinguishers, and hand tools. So beyond the safety enhancements, we have a dedicated expert team to prepare for hazardous conditions and manage the implementation of public safety power shutoffs, or what we call PSPS. Now, these shutoffs remain a tool of last resort. Policymakers and regulators have acknowledged that they are important and a needed tool in the face of concerning fire weather conditions. Now, we are accelerating grid hardening work in communities that have experienced frequent power shutoffs in 2019 and 2020 to reduce the impact on our customers and the need for PSPS. Now, this work is on pace to be completed by October of this year. And with these upgrades completed, we expect to see a 75% reduction in power system shutoffs, affecting these circuits and assuming the same weather conditions as last year. Now, of the 57,000 customers who have experienced at least one PSPS event last year, about 37,000 would not have experienced an outage if these upgrades were in place in 2020. And of the remaining 20,000 customers, they would see fewer or shorter outages as a result of these fire weather threat conditions. So in addition to the work on SCE's infrastructure, we also expect the overall risk of wildfires to be reduced thanks to an $18 million commitment that we have made to fund helitankers with nighttime firefighting capabilities in conjunction with 3 counties in our service area. The agreement took effect in mid-June and almost immediately paid dividends, with helitankers being deployed to fight fires within days. The funding allows faster firefighting response to wildfire ignitions day and night, and slows the progress of wildfires as they begin, protecting the lives and property of our customers and our communities.
While SCE continues its efforts to mitigate against wildfire risk with its vegetation management program, covered conductor installation, and support for local fire authorities, state policymakers are also addressing this risk. California continues significant increases in its support for fire suppression and prevention, as well as strengthening its situational awareness and aerial firefighting capabilities.
So the state has made considerable investments over the last couple of years in the wildfire mitigation prevention space. This year alone, there's budget proposals that are in the neighborhood of $2 billion in commitments, both for prevention, community hardening, home hardening, brush clearance, forest management, but then in addition on the suppression side, significant investments in growing the California Cal Fire workforce. Personnel numbers have risen dramatically over the last couple of years, from roughly 5,800 in 2016, 2017 to now well over 7,000 firefighters here in California within the Cal Fire ranks today. So very considerable and really historic investments in this space by the state. Of particular note in this year's budget is the establishment of the Wildfire Forecast and Threat Intelligence Center, which has really been compared to something like the National Hurricane Center, which will really provide the state and enhance the state's ability to forecast, monitor, consider all the ground conditions, weather, fuels, etc., and respond in a way that they've not been able to in the past. And I think this really complements some of the investments that we've made with our weather stations, with our high definition cameras throughout our service territory, which combined really provides critical assets for the state and local firefighters to quickly identify a particular situation and assess what's going on and respond in an appropriate and obviously critically timely manner. Another point to highlight would be the state's investment in really their aerial capabilities. Over the last couple of years, the state has been adding Black Hawk, or as they like to call them, Firehawk helicopters to the state's fleet here. They're about halfway through this investment with the ultimate goal of adding 12 of these helicopters to the CAL FIRE fleet. And critically important, I think, with this is their ability to fight at night, which really is a game changer for CAL FIRE and others in the state. In addition to the helicopters, the state is procuring the services of several Lockheed Martin C-130 Hercules air tankers. They've been procured from the military and will be phased in over the next year. These air tankers obviously provide an additional and critical component in fighting fire in some of the more hard to reach areas. And so bringing those on, in addition to the helicopters, really creates quite an aerial assault, if you will, that the state has been able to compile.
This year's state budget proposals, in the range of $2 billion, address wildfire suppression efforts as well as funding to increase the state's situational awareness capabilities with the creation of the Wildfire Forecast and Threat Intelligence Center. Many of the tools and technologies that will be used on a statewide basis line up with SCE's efforts in using advanced weather and fire modeling, expert teams, and supercomputing power to better protect communities from wildfire threat.
We've invested in the most advanced weather forecasting technologies to increase the amount of supercomputing power, and this is going to allow us to double the resolution of our in-house weather modeling data from 2 kilometer down to a 1 kilometer grid spacing. In addition, we're developing machine learning models to improve wind speed forecasts at specific locations. The initial verification of these models shows significant improvement in the timing of threshold exceedance at select weather station locations. These enhancements will allow us to be more precise in determining where and when critical fire weather conditions may occur within our service area. The same in-house weather modeling data is also used to run millions of fire simulations to help determine what, if any, impacts a wildfire will have on nearby communities. And this is critical as we try to manage risk and determine if a PSPS outage is necessary. We'll be working towards integrating some of this data into our PSPS decision-making protocols this fall. During PSPS events, wind speed and relative humidity data are taken every 10 minutes from more than 1,000 weather stations near our high fire risk area circuits. They play a critical role in the decision to de-energize the circuit once it meets PSPS outage criteria. Vegetation sampling is conducted bi-weekly to determine moisture content and the susceptibility to a wildfire. Our situational awareness capabilities also include 161 high-definition cameras to help with early wildfire detection. This real-time fire monitoring tool helps to keep our firefighters informed and our communities safe. The fire threat this year is extremely high due to a lack of precipitation, drier than normal vegetation, and the return of extreme drought conditions, which now cover over 3/4 of California compared to just 3% last year at this time. The extremely dry weather and drought is stressing the vegetation and accelerating fuel dryness, with moisture levels more typical of later in the summer. This means fires will have the potential to grow larger and more intense earlier in the season. However, with Santa Ana winds returning this fall, it does not necessarily mean that fires will be worse than normal, since the vegetation is typically at very dry levels in October. The greatest threat for significant fire this summer will be across the Southern Sierra, as well as the Angeles National Forest and parts of the Los Padres National Forest. This is due to a combination of the existing widespread tree mortality problem in the Sierra, low snowpack, drier than normal fuels, and the lack of significant fire in over 2 decades. On the positive side, the lack of rain has led to sparser grass growth this year, which may help to reduce the number of roadside ignitions and fire spread. We've identified multiple locations, or what we call areas of concern, within our service area that are high risk for a significant wildfire. This is where we are accelerating inspections, remediations, and vegetation clearance. We are also assessing recent burn scars to determine the amount of wildfire threat that remains. This helps identify circuits that could potentially be excluded from a PSPS event, and it also helps us understand any potential downstream mitigating effects some communities may experience.
Mitigating against wildfire risk requires continual focus and is an ongoing and year-round effort. We continue to increase our investments to mitigate against California wildfire risk and are applying advanced technology solutions as well as people power to prepare for and meet that challenge. It is a responsibility we take seriously and a commitment that we make every day to the safety of the communities that we serve. We have built on the work completed in the last several years, and in 2021 are making significant improvements to manage wildfire risk on our system. We are better prepared than ever to face this risk.